Running late. It is Thursday, September 8th. This is the final budget meeting and the millage rates agenda for School District of Indian River County. It is 5:31. We'll begin in this meeting at this time. We're in the Joanne Idlette Junior Teacher Education Center. I'm calling this meeting to order. Pledge of Allegiance. Mrs. Rosario, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm calling for the adoption of the orders of the day. There are no consent items to approve, so we have to move into the public hearing for proposed millage rates and proposed budget. I will recognize at this time Dr. Moore. Dr. Moore is on Teams. Go ahead, Dr. Moore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I'll turn it over to, can you hear me clear?
Yes.
I'm hearing an echo. I'll turn it over to Mr. Fagan for his presentation.
Or to the chair, to the board. Tonight we have several items to approve. But before we get started, I want to acknowledge the accounting staff, some of which are sitting behind me, especially Mrs. Kim Coleman. She's the Director of Finance, whose dedication and persistence is essential to the completion of this work. We also have the accounting team, who's worked late for many weeks, and also many of them worked all 3 days of the Labor Day weekend. And also a special thanks to Ms. Lynn Justin, our executive assistant, who keeps us on task and on time. As I mentioned before, total years experience of everyone in the accounting department is approximately 180 years of total accounting experience. 115 of those years are with the district itself. Without this team, there would be a much older looking and balder man before you tonight. There are 4 items for the board to approve tonight. Final millage rates for 22-23, final budget for 22-23, annual financial report, what we refer to as the AFR, as of June 30, 2022, and final budget amendments as of June 30, 2022. This is the second of 2 public meetings that are required to approve the district millage rates and the budget. The first meeting was held on July 25, 2022. Trim advertisements were approved by the board on July 18th and were published in the TC Palm on July 22nd. The notice of tonight's meeting was through what we call the direct mailing from the property appraiser's office, called the TRIM notice. TRIM stands for Truth and Millage. The millage rates to be approved tonight are the same as the millage rates that were approved at the tentative board meeting, at the tentative budget meeting. Same rates as before. Final millage rates for this year, 22-23, required local effort, 3.2370. Basic discretionary operating, 0.7480. Capital outlay, 1.5. And additional voter discretion, 0.50. Total of 5.9850 mills. Again, the same rates that were published and approved at the tentative meeting. Highlights tonight for the budget. School taxable values increased to $25.8 billion. This is an increase of $3.9 billion, or 17% compared to the prior year. Total millage rate and the proposed revenue to be generated from these millage rates is $148 million. This is $16 million more than the prior year, or 12%. Total millage rate to be levied exceeds the rollback rate by 10%. This means that the average taxpayer in the Indian River will pay approximately 10% more in school taxes, depending on their specific property values, locations, exemptions, and etc. Total district budget for 22-23 is approximately $367 million. This is a slight 1% increase compared to the tentative, so again, no change in millage rates, no change in real budget between the tentative and the final budget. The general fund balance at the end of last year was $20 million, or 13% of revenue. This is compared to $24 million in the prior year. This is a reduction of approximately 16%. However, this was a planned reduction. If you recall, last year, we implemented additional academic resources at the school level. We hired We did the 8-period day. We paid teachers to work their 7 of 8 and 8 of 8 supplements. And we also added additional teachers based on the SAM model above what the schools had actually earned for their FTE. This was in an attempt to address learning losses because of COVID in the prior year. ESSER money, we still have our ESSER money. For ESSER 1 was $3 million. We've collected all that. ESSER 2 is $13 million. We've collected approximately 99% of that. ESSER 3 is approximately $30 million, and we've collected $6 million, or about 20% of that money so far. The balance of the ESSER money will be collected over the next 2 years. Budget highlights compared to the tentative. Again, no major significant changes. Operating budget is approximately $190 million. It was $187 at the tentative. Debt service is the same at $29 million. Capital outlay is at $59 million compared to $60 million at the tentative. Slight small change of 1%. Special revenue is approximately $41 million. Tentative it was $38. Slight increase of 6%, primarily because of the timing of closing out the year in process. Food services at $10 million, same as the tentative. Health benefits fund is $33 million, same as the tentative. And extended days approximately $2.6 million. No change from the tentative budget. Once the board approves all these resolutions for tonight, the district will be in compliance with Florida statute, the Department of Education, and the Department of Revenue. Another item for the board to approve tonight is the annual financial report. Some highlights and some comments regarding the annual financial report, what we call the AFR. AFR is basically broken into 2 sections. First section is what we call governmental. This is full accrual accounting basis. Second section is called governmental. This is what we call individual funds like general fund, capital fund, when you hear us talk about that. You might say, well, Ron, what is the main difference in these funny words you were saying? Well, in accrual accounting, it all has to do with how you recognize your expenses and how you recognize your revenue. In accrual accounting, you recognize the revenue when you earn it, but not necessarily when you're paid. So if I were to have a company that sold software and I give you an invoice for $1 million, I can recognize that revenue right then and there, but you haven't paid me a dime. Same thing with expenses. When I incur that expense, I recognize it, not when I pay it. Modified accrual, which is what the district primarily does on a day in and day out basis, you recognize the revenue when you get it, and you recognize the payable when you pay it. At the end of the year, though, we do this thing called conversion entries, where we recognize all this debt that we haven't paid and all this revenue we haven't received, which is really not that much. And then we call these things called conversion entries, and we make this a separate accounting statement, this accounting document. And basically what it does, it allows the public to compare us to a publicly traded company. So they're able to compare apples to apples. If you were to give someone our fund accounting documents, they wouldn't have a clue what to do with it. So this is basically an accounting process in which to make everybody equitable across evaluations. Net position overall for the district was an increase to $180 million, which is a net change in equity or net position of $2.3 million for the overall year, and that's what we call a good thing. Other than that, that concludes my comments and presentation.
Okay, at this time I'll open it up to the floor to fellow board members. Who would like to ask anything or have a discussion?
I just wanted to talk a little bit for a second about a conversation that we had at a prior, I think it was in June, budget meeting, the discussion about, it might have been even before, the discussion about some of the schools having a wish list for performing arts instruments, and I think their wish list was about $30,000. What I've just found out is that we have allocated $150,000 total to high schools and middle schools.
And elementary.
And elementary will receive $1,000 each, for each school, approximately. The good news about that is that in the prior year, we allocated nothing to the performing arts program, and in the year before, also nothing. So I'm very happy about that. I'm happy that we're able to assist them in using it for whatever purposes their performing arts programs need. But Mr. Fagan, if they do not use the full allocated amount that they have, or that we're allocating to them. And this allocation, just to be clear, does not show up here in our budget book. It shows up in the capital budget, correct?
To the chair, yes, ma'am.
And that capital budget is not the same as the capital outlay? Or is that the same as capital outlay?
To the chair, same thing, yes, ma'am. Just
Same
different-
thing.
different
So we have
terminology.
capital outlay budgeted in our budget book,
Correct,
but what would be the difference?
just terminology.
Okay. So can you help explain that? Because I don't know if I'm able to articulate the difference in the terminology.
Between capital and capital outlay?
Like, why won't we see the performing arts $150,000 in this budget book? That's what I meant.
Give me just a second, please.
Because I know on Monday, as you're looking for that, I know on Monday, we're going to see something that's going to come to us from Mr. Bass on capital funding.
I'm sorry. Please turn to page 215 of your budget book. Center of the page under new and replacing equipment. Performing arts allocation, $150,000.
Oh, beautiful. Now, that wasn't there when we last talked, so that was just, must have been added, correct?
Would have been the difference between the tentative and the final budget.
Perfect. So I appreciate that. So that's a good thing. I do appreciate all of the work that you and your team have done to put this together. I have concerns still with ESSER money and how we're using ESSER money. But overall, I think we can be much more transparent with that process. Still, I'm also not 100% excited about going for a TAN, but I'm happy to support what has been presented today, and this is not the first time that we have seen the budget process, the budget report and the process, so thank you for that.
Okay, Dr. Schiff, you're good. Dr. Jones? Oh, you need to open your mic.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Fagan, and everyone there tonight for all of your work. Just to follow up on the performing arts, I think meeting with you and some of the, and Dr. Moore and some of the performing arts people, I think it would be great if we could get back into the budget for line items for elementary, middle, and high school, just so they know what's coming. And the $150,000, certainly a great benefit to them this year. Only other question I have is, as we go into the future without the ESSER funds and looking at our budget and our fund balance and so forth, just making sure that we're able to continue what we started to do with instruction and moving forward with that, because not having that ESSER money certainly helped us with many areas. So I know we'll be looking closely at that as we go into next year with not having those types of funds. But thank you again for all of the work you've done.
Okay, Mr. Barefoot?
No comments. I think
Okay.
It was well presented.
Okay, thank you. I do have one or two. One second. Yeah, thank you for adding the 150,000. I know that's a catch that I found when we were looking at tentative budget, and I had some people approach me and say they were concerned that we didn't have any budget at all for a band or for symphony or anything. However, that 150 has all been put into capital, so that can only be used to purchase equipment and things like that, correct?
To the chair, yes, ma'am.
So how would they go ahead and purchase their books and, the materials they need?
To the chair, that would come through the principal's discretionary fund.
Okay. So the principals still have to go to their discretionary fund for the curriculum that they use?
Now, to the chair, yes, ma'am. for
So
music.
could we maybe in the future look at placing that as a line item somewhere for curriculum
To the chair, yes, ma'am.
for fine arts?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. The other question I had was, and it's not on the same page here, I was trying to find it on the final book, on the earlier book, under school board office. It's on page 122 of the tentative book. I'm not sure where it is on here. It was something I brought up at the tentative meeting, So I wanted to make sure that we kind of covered it. And the question was just about attorney search. So the funds there, their legal fees project, $287,000. That was a attorney search cost, correct?
To the chair, to the board, what page are we on?
Oh, well, in the tentative book, it was 122 of 448. So I was having a hard time finding it in here, because it
moment,
really
please.
got moved.
$120.
It was 122. That 287, 625, that was a question I had earlier, and you were going to look into it about the, was that
So
the
the-
attorney search that we were?
Through the chair, that was the actual amount that was budgeted for 2021. What you actually spent was 206. So we budgeted 287 in 2021. We only
Okay.
spent 206.
Did that include the attorney search, though, or was that put as a separate line item somewhere else?
The attorney search was pretty much all internal funds. There was all internal people. There was no real expenditure to recruit for a new attorney.
Okay,
That's all in-house personnel. That's purchasing me, other people reviewing documents. There's no cost to issue an RFP for service.
okay. That's all I had. Thank you, everyone, for preparing. I apologize, I was late.
Wait, may I? We went through, we had a consulting firm help with, oh no, that was with the superintendent search. Sorry, disregard.
All right. So if there are no other items or questions for discussion, we're going to move on. Dr. Moore, have you documented that this public hearing was properly advertised in accordance with the state statutes?
Yes, I have.
Okay. We now recess this meeting to conduct a public hearing as advertised. The public hearing is now in session. Dr. Moore, are there any written responses to the advertised public hearing to be read at this time?
Not at this time.
Okay, is there any public input tonight? Mrs. Esplin? No, okay. The public is invited to address this issue at this time. Is there an individual representing an organization or on his own personal or public interest who wishes to speak? The chair concludes that the announced public hearing on September 8th, 2022 has been conducted pursuant to notice and that ample opportunity to address this issue has been provided to all. The board meeting is reconvened at this time. Item C, approval of resolution 2023-03, adoption of the millage rates. This is the official board approval of the resolution that represent required local effort, basic discretionary, additional voted, and capital outlay by resolution 2023-03. I'll call for a motion.
So moved.
Okay,
I'll second.
Dr. Schiff, Mr. Rosario. Mrs. Esplin, will you please do a roll call?
Mrs. Rosario,
Yes.
Dr. Schiff,
Aye.
Mr. Barefoot,
Aye.
Dr. Jones, Mrs. Barrenborg.
Aye. Did she say yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry.
All right.
And the vote passed 5-0.
Thank you. The vote cast 5-0, it passes. And now we are into the discussion of the 2022-2023 proposed budget. I'll open the floor to fellow board members for discussion. Anyone that wanted to discuss the budget? Seeing none? Dr. Moore, have you documented that this public hearing was properly advertised in accordance with state statutes?
I have.
We now recess this meeting to conduct the public hearing as advertised. The public hearing is now in session. Dr. Moore, are there any written responses to the advertised public hearing to be read at this time?
not the time.
Mrs. Esplin, are there any public input?
No, ma'am.
Okay. All right. The public is invited to address this issue at this time as they're an individual representing an organization or any personal or public interest who wishes to speak. The chair concludes that the announced public hearing on September 8, 2022 has been conducted pursuant to notice and that ample opportunity to address this issue has been provided to all. The board meeting is reconvened at this time. Item C, approval of Resolution 2023-04 for adoption of final budget and approval of the 2021-2022 annual financial report, inclusive of cost report, and the 2021-2022 final budget amendment number 10. I'll call for a motion.
So moved.
Dr. Schiff?
Second?
Okay. Dr. Jones? Mrs. Esplin, will you please do a roll call?
Ms. Rosario?
Yes.
Dr. Schiff?
Aye.
Mr. Barefoot?
Aye.
Dr. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Barrenborg?
Aye.
The vote passes 5-0.
Okay, with that, we move to the final item, which is our closing. I'll adjourn the meeting at 5:52.